this is Joseph Carlson, and this is episode 125 of Gaming with Grief, and I'm calling this episode Midnight Mass Review. But I want to remind you guys that this podcast will hit my website, www.gamingwithgrief.com, Monday morning at 7 a.m., so you can go there, let me know what you think of the show, leave a comment, let me know how I can improve, or you can go to gwgpodfellows@gmail.com and write me an email. Again, let me know what you think of the show, or maybe you have a suggestion, something you want me to talk about. And you can find me on Twitter at JustLittleJoe. And of course, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes or the Google Play Store. Likes, subscribes, stars, all that kind of stuff there would be great. So yeah, this is just a quick little intro. I know I don't usually do movies and shows. This is Gaming with Grief after all, but my wife and I recently watched a pretty amazing show on Netflix called Midnight Mass. And we will talk about it here shortly. I'm just doing an intro to set everything up, and my wife will come in the room very shortly, and we will talk about the show. Like everything else, in the beginning we'll just talk about general impressions, probably a little bit of background about the creator, and then we'll do spoilers at the end, and man, do we have a lot of spoilers. So, just wait for the transition, everybody. We're back.
Yes, we are back.
Yay! My wife, my amazing wife. So, to start this off, before we really get into Midnight Mass, you know more about the creator-writer Mike Flanagan than I do, because you've watched The Haunting of Hill House.
Yes.
And The Haunting of Bly Manor.
Yes, which are both amazing. I will say the first one I enjoyed more than the second, but the second one was really good. I just love his writing and his dialogue. His writing is really
good. But he, there seems to be some common themes in Midnight Mass with grief, drinking, alcoholism probably. It seems like a lot of people are dealing. Somebody online said I think The Haunting of Hill House, that each member of the family was a stage of grief, and he responded to them and said that's a good spot. So he purposely did that so you when you watch Midnight Mass, just if people don't know, just to give people the general story without spoiling a Midnight Mass, it takes place on a kind of undescript island. They don't really say what part of the world or what part of the States it's in. It's definitely the States. But it's only got 127 people on the island. Again, without getting the spoiler-free stuff, there's a tragedy that happens in the beginning, and one of the main characters, Riley, moves back to town. He goes back to this island to be with his family after there's been a tragedy. And he kind of has to put his life together. And then a priest comes into town to take the place of the old acting priest who went to the Holy Land and is sick, basically. And hilarity ensues.
It is kind of funny.
Yeah, kind of. No, it's really serious, and apparently Mike Flanagan was raised Catholic, and also I read a few interviews with him. He's currently in Alcoholics Anonymous, so there is depictions of AA meetings in the show, and it's actually very respectful. Like I was telling my wife, it seems realistic, because he's obviously talking about things he's experienced, like with the AA meetings and stuff. And so some of the conversations, obviously you don't share a lot that happens in those meetings, but you still, you can be true to them in a way. Did you like the stuff? I mean, did it seemed respectful, right? The AA stuff?
I think so. I haven't had any experience, but it definitely did seem respectful. And also, I got really emotional one part of it. Yeah,
they do talk. There's a miscarriage in the show, and so we did not expect that. So we were both kind of moved.
So that it made me cry a lot.
Yeah, because someone does give a really good speech about it.
It was a really good speech.
Yeah, and it's really good. So basically, it's this town is there's 127 people. They talk about there's been an oil spill that has affected the town. They're all fishermen, obviously, because it's an island community. And so people are kind of, the island isn't what it once was. There's they said people just started leaving. They didn't even sell their houses. They would just leave the island. And you really feel like it's this incredibly tight community that's kind of on the decline. And this priest comes and kind of reinvigorates the community because the sermons he gives are amazing.
They are really good.
Yeah, and I heard an interview with the actor who played the priest. He said those all came at the end of shooting. So it sounds like he did them all back to back, which is amazing because mentally you have to be in the headspace of this is where you were this day, this is where you were that day. And what happens is this leads up to the show kind of takes place like the day before or the week of Easter. So it starts out, you have Ash Wednesday, which I'm not Catholic, but I do realize enough that is the time of like apparently you start repentance and start the Ash Wednesday starts a lead up to the resurrection of Jesus on Easter. You know, that Catholics believe, and there's been many people that have written about, and Mike Flanagan himself, the writer director, that he was raised Catholic, and I think he was an altar boy, maybe, but you can definitely see that he has definitely sat in on some priestly. You know, he's heard these speeches before in church. And I heard one commentator that what used to be a pastor wrote about the show. It's by Jared Petty at IGN. If you've seen the show, read the article because there's a lot of spoilers. But he talked about how the speeches seem more like a Pentecostal minister or like a fire and brimstone minister as opposed to a priest. But it actually gives the show more power. And I asked you about Mike Flanagan in the beginning because it seems like this is stuff that he deals with a lot, like grief.
There's a lot of grief, and it's all really intense, but it all just sort of, you can, what's the word? You can kind of see where the characters are coming from because he kind of makes it so you can, you know.
Yeah, he gives everybody the extra perspective and weight. Like they don't. There is certain characters that focus on more because obviously they're main characters, but you do get a sense that this, like one of the actresses, I'm not going to say who because that would be a spoiler. She basically said she didn't look at her backstory of where her character came from. She looked more at the island as a character and how her character related to the island, because she'd been there a while and that's how she viewed her character. That this thing is a place, and. It's good. It's 7 episodes on Netflix. I know this is like the shorter beginning part of the show, but we really wanted to get into spoilers. So if you like very serious discussions of grief, loss, and somebody being very respectful, and religion, I think in a way, it's still respectful of religion in a way, even though, you know, you could say it isn't, but it's 7 episodes on Netflix, so it is a self-contained story. And I think this is where Netflix and TV nowadays really excels, because none of this could be fit into a movie. You would have to make a lot of concessions. And what I'm seeing also is there's a conversation about other shows on Netflix, like Squid Game, which I've heard is very good. But they're like, well, what are we going to do in season 2? Because everybody's talking about season 1. And I see this all the time, where you have a very good season of television, like in the olden days when there was 20 episodes of television on TV. And it's like, well, what's going to happen the next season? And we've all had that experience where we're like, man, the first season was so much better. They should have just ended it there. I'm glad that things like Midnight Mass exist to say, this is all we're going to tell, and the story is complete. We need to finish Penny Dreadful, but they had the same thing where it was, the creator said, I'm not making any more seasons. I just want to tell the story that I want to tell. It's 3 seasons and we're done. So I think that is right now the power of television, to tell the kind of story you want in the amount of time you want without worrying about, well, it's got to be renewed for the second season. I got to have a 4-season arc of all these things. It's like, no, I want to tell a 7-episode story about a sleepy town in the world, a sleepy island, and be done after the 7 episodes.
I will say I'm really sad that it's over, but I probably will go back and watch it again.
Yeah.
Because I like it that much.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way, to see, like, when you know now what you know, the progression of all that and stuff. So I guess without further ado, I think you and I will get into spoilers now, because I think, like, a lot of people that watch a show before we watched it, there was a lot of talk online about like endings explained and this is a fan theory and blah blah blah. So you've been warned. This is the second time I'm warning you. My wife and I will have full spoilers for the show. So here we go. So 3, 2, 1, spoilers. Wow, vampires, huh?
Feels kind of good to say it, doesn't it?
It does. I saw an interview again with the creator. Like, I did a lot of research before this, just because I was in bed with you. We were watching fan theories online, and people break this show down. The creator said he didn't want to use the word vampires because he thought that was too tongue-in-cheek.
It is.
That saying the word vampires kind of made the show less impactful, and he wanted to focus on the themes of town, about these people feeling a certain way or whatever. And I understand that. I don't think it's wrong. I just
no.
I think it's kind of interesting because it does give weight to the people's emotions and things like that. And I think it's like you and I talked when the priest Monazer Pruitt is fed off by that vampire in Jerusalem. Like you said, he has dementia. He's not really there all the way.
He thinks it's an angel. Right? Because he's just on the...
Delirious. And then the
vampire
vampire feeds off him, so he's also probably lost a lot of blood. Yeah. So he believes, and he was dying, basically, like elderly, had Alzheimer's really bad. So when this happens to him and the vampire gives his blood to the priest, it's a sacrament from God almost. Because that is a big thing in Catholicism. This is the blood of Christ, this is the body of Christ. You take communion. Jesus died for our sins. There's a lot of iconography. I mean, we're not religious, but we have been to church, so there's a lot of iconography and religion.
I can see where the resurrection part would come into play. In his mind. Yeah,
and the priest talks about it a lot. This is the new covenant between. I'm gonna butcher it, but there's the first covenant in the Old Testament, the new, the second covenant in the Old Testament. There's the first covenant. In the New Testament, there's a second covenant with Jesus. This is the third covenant, the resurrection of life and death. This priest Pruitt comes to town and starts basically performing miracles by giving them the blood of the angel, as he calls it, but we know it's basically a vampire. And so people start being healed because the blood is transformative. And at first I didn't like the fact, because I am very weird and traditional with my science fiction, he was able to exist in the sunlight with this vampire blood running through him. But they do explain later that since he is still technically alive and his heart never stopped beating, that he needs to truly die to be reborn, not only in Catholicism, but reborn as a true vampire, basically. But it is really fascinating. I'm sure this has all been done before, but I think making a contained story on this island, it's more impactful because what I've seen stuff like this with religion and vampirism, it's almost like a wink wink nudge nudge that everybody's evil because they're Catholic. Usually religion is the punching bag in movies anyway, where people just hate religion. So there's always like Bev Keane in the show is very religious. She's one of the characters that always has a Bible verse for something. And everything I've read online said, I mean, we all know those people. The few times you and I have been to church, you always meet that one person that's like, will recite Bible passages to you, and I always think, okay, we get it. You read stuff. But I think it's an amazing, what at the end he talks to someone early on in his life. He had an affair with someone in town. He heals her because she is elderly as well. When he comes back to town, she's got Alzheimer's and not doing well, and he gives her basically the covenant, the blood of the vampire, and she starts healing. And at the end of the show, when everything's literally going to shit, I think that's probably one of my favorite scenes in the show when he says, watching our daughter grow up has been amazing, and what you and I did wasn't a sin, and I love her, and I'm sorry, for everything. And I thought that was a really good scene where, there was a real heartfelt moment where he's like, this didn't really end up the way I wanted,
Yeah, we are the wolves.
Yeah, like, and that's an amazing scene towards the end when everybody that's been turned into a vampire in town is coming up the path, and you see their eyes change, like light up, which I think is a really easy effect, but it's pretty effective, I think.
It was pretty effective. I mean, everything was on fire. It was dark.
Yeah, because Bev got the revelation, or literally from Revelations, I guess. Again, I'm not religious, but she talks about, everything will burn in fire.
I think Bev poisoned him.
Yeah, there's a thing early on, because since his heart hasn't stopped and he starts getting sick and like puking up blood, my wife and I have this theory that he told Bev what was going on and needed to make the final sacrifice. So she gave him poison, which they use in the end to basically kill the townspeople that have been taking the sacrament so they can truly be reborn as vampires. Mm-hmm. And I think Bev did it on him. And maybe that was for him an act of faith of, you do it to me first to see if this works. And then if it works, we can give these gifts to the townspeople.
But what if he didn't know that?
Yeah, he didn't know, and that was the thing. And I think that scene where he has been puking up blood and he comes home and people are there wanting to talk to him and he pukes up a lot of blood and his eyes turn red. They really show her face and reaction to what's happening. And everybody else is freaking out because he's obviously puked up blood in his own place and he's dead. And she is very focused on what is happening to him. And when he wakes up, I think that's when she kind of is relieved that, like, oh, now this is a true literal gift from God.
I think he didn't know any better per se. Maybe he was unintentionally manipulating people because he thought that it would really work. But Bev was manipulating him.
Right. And I think she wasn't reborn until the last minute, and she does express that because Riley in town, who my wife and I talked, Riley in the beginning was involved in an accident. He was driving drunk and killed someone. So he comes back to town, starts going to AA to pick up, move forward with his grief, pick his, do the best he can. And he gives very good speeches about, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what my future is. I want to be of use. And he meets his old high school sweetheart who's also moved back to the island. And she says, just worry about today. Don't worry about tomorrow. And that helps him out. And he starts going to AA with the priest because Pruitt basically says that, I can do your AA meetings. Don't go to the mainland. Stay here. And I think it's because he just doesn't want anybody to leave the island. He's like, just stay here.
He just wants to fix everybody.
Well, Riley finds out about the covenant, this demon that fed on the priest. Pruitt brings him back to Crockett to basically give the gifts of the angel to the island, keeps him in a case. The angel flies around at night, feeding on cats and maybe a person. And he is giving blood back to the priest so the priest can feed, because the priest has now been dead and is reborn and has the hunger for blood. Riley walks in on them, and Riley is fed upon and turned into a vampire, goes out in the sunlight. Pruitt drags him back in and says, he burns a little bit. He drags him back and says, you can't do that. And this is when Bev starts to get a little bit mad, comes in. And Pruitt has already told her about the angel because she said the angel has bestowed these gifts upon people. Why did she pick Riley, who does not love his gifts or appreciate the gifts that he's given? But some of us have been spared. Yeah. And, at the end, her burning the buildings down because she wants to bathe everything in fire, screws them over, because the last two homes are the church and the community center, which are near the church. And somebody burns those.
So she pretty much killed everybody.
She killed everybody in town because they have nowhere to hide. There's nowhere. I mean, the other thing would be if you're so steeped in vampire lore, but you have to be a real big nerd like me and know that you could just dig a hole. But they get to the point where, what are they thinking? They've just been they've just been turned into a vampire maybe an hour or two before that. What's going on? The priest Pruitt did have this whole speech he wanted to give to them after they were turned during Easter Mass, is when they were all turned, midnight Mass. He starts having Mass in the evening. And and I think if he had more of his wits about him, if he weren't shot. Yeah, because someone tries to stop everything. It's so grotesque. The demon shows up, and it's a bloodbath.
But I think if nobody had stepped in, he probably would have been able to.
right, calm everyone down. But like my wife and I, they're not a plot hole, but I think one thing that you think for a second, you think to yourself, wait a minute, wouldn't they need food? So you don't want to convert everybody in town because they're going to need to feed, right? So,
yeah, because you have to keep a constant supply. So
right.
you'd have to just keep maybe donating their blood and put it into a certain area.
Oh yeah, we have tons of theories of blood drives that we were talking about and things you could do to feed, so that way you wouldn't have to. Yeah, I mean you're going to run out of food.
Yeah, they would have. Yeah.
Which there was that movie, was that Daybreakers with Ethan Hawke several years ago, where the vampires were running out of food, and they had a blood bank of people like below ground, and they were like literally sucking them dry.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting that they had like coffee.
They kept them alive, but they were, just basically like you said.
They're cattle, basically. Yeah. They're milking them for
blood.
But
the vampires who couldn't get the blood would turn decrepit.
Yeah, and in Daywalkers they'd also feed off each other, which you can't do. It like started deforming the vampires because they were like feeding off each other. Yeah. I do like, again, going back to the speech with Pruitt and his wife or his lover when they meet and talk about their daughter. He has that thing of like, I did all this because I went to Jerusalem, the Holy Land. I brought this creature back because I did want to give these sacraments to people, but I couldn't watch you die. Because she was elderly, ailing, Alzheimer's, bedridden, kind of. He said, that's why I did it for you. And there is a scene earlier on when he hasn't revealed to the town what's going on, but he goes to her house and says, her daughter's there, who's a doctor, and says, I know your mother has never missed church, and I know she's ailing, so I'm here to help that. And there's an amazing scene. It's very quick, but he does give her the blood of Christ. He does a whole service, and there's just a quick scene where he sees her in bed and he starts to cry because she is obviously elderly and dying, and he wants to help her, so he starts giving her the blood of the angel. A quick aside, it is strange to me that they keep calling it an angel when it's the most demonic looking angel I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it's got like
bat wings,
horn
almost
type things on its wings.
On the V of the wings, it's got.
But it does actually it makes me think that they're even more swept up into their religion because they're blinded by that.
Right. Yeah. That it's like, well, this is
what it's got to be.
Right. This is.
Can't be anything else other than this.
Well, it helps too because all this stuff is built up, and he showed these gifts to people towards the end. So just seeing the angel, which by the way is an unsettling image, seeing the angel in the robes, the Catholic robes, walking through the congregation, it was very good to see that.
Evil disguising itself.
Right, evil disguising itself is good, and it's so effective. The thing is, they did an amazing creature design with that.
He looked
and
really
it's simple too. It wasn't like overdone where you're like, wow, that's like, why does he have 7 pairs of wings? That's dumb. But no, it's and there's theories online, and I don't know where you fall, but like he towards the end, I mean, without spoiling everything, I guess he gets his wings cut, like holes in his wings, and it's hard for him to fly, and the sun's coming up and he flies away. 2 people that survive in the boats, Keena and I forget the boy's name, Warren. They're 2 young kids in town. They survive on a boat. They're just outside floating in the water, kind of looking at the town burning, going, well, we're out here. They see the creature fly away, and Keena's like, is he going to make it? And Warren's like, it's 30 miles to the next island, and I don't think he can outrun the sun. Like, the sun's coming up. And, Keena was the one she's in a wheelchair in the beginning. Mm-hmm. She is healed, so she can obviously been walking around. And there's a lot of fan theories to say that, and the lore of vampires, if you're the prodigitor, the first vampire, and you give these gifts, if you die, all the gifts go away. And there's a scene at the end when they're floating in the boat, when the sun comes up after a few moments, they watch the town burn, and Keena turns to Warren and says, I can't feel my legs anymore. So a lot of people have a fan theory that the vampire did die. He burned up in the sun because the gifts are gone, basically, which is pretty amazing.
It's a good theory.
Yeah, and I liked it. Like, you didn't have. I think it would have been a cool shot to see the vampire fly away from the sun and just watch him slowly burn up as he's flying away. That would have been a cool.
I think so.
But I think they wanted it a little bit more.
Wanted to leave it more.
Yeah, Which, again, since it's a contained story, I mean, do you have to keep it open-ended? You could have just been like, no, we're done. He's done. We're fine. We're good. But he may do like a Midnight Mass chapter 2 or like a prequel or something or explain more. And apparently he's been trying to write this for a while.
10 years.
Yeah, and he's put Katie Siegel, who plays one of the characters, she's in another of his... Hush. And she is a writer who is writing a story called Midnight Mass on her computer when the attacker comes in. She's obviously deaf, so somebody's able to... Anyway, it's a good...
I'll preface this by saying, just brace yourself if you're going to watch that.
Hush is a pretty...
In the daytime,
preferably. I think it's one of those horror movies where I watched and thought, like, all this is...
There's no reason.
Right, there's no reason, but also it doesn't fall into the trope of, like, we all do that where we're, like, watching a horror movie, we're like, why are they doing that? And I think Hush was a good one where you're like, oh, no, that all makes sense, But Mike Flanagan also directed that. So, but, I mean, back to Midnight Mass. As being a big fan of the supernatural and horror, I don't know if I told you this, but I did. I think, for me, not that his other series are bad, The Haunting of Hill House or The Haunting of Bly Manor. For some reason, I love the supernatural. I love werewolves. I love vampires. I love all this crazy stuff that we've read about for years. But ghosts have just never really done it for me. There's something less scary about a ghost, I think, for me. And so I think that's why I didn't really watch those shows. It's
so good.
But they're good, so I might have to go back.
It's not like it totally plays up on the whole ghost thing, per se. It's more about this...
The family.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I may have to go back and retroactively watch those.
I think you should.
I should watch those.
Mm-hmm.
But I think vampires are always more... when you can physically see something and can touch you, that's more affecting to me. And they did a good job with the creature design and stuff.
They did.
So, I mean, I guess I think that'll be the end of the episode. But, just watch Midnight Mass. And then if you have listened to the spoiler cast, you can write me or write the podcast and let me know what you thought of the show and what
I give it a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, it's very good. 10 out of 10. I mean, we don't really give scores and they don't care about us.
But it's my personal.
Yeah, it's very good. And like you said, I might watch it again to see how it progresses. Knowing now what you know.
You can look at other things in there and just sort of...
I saw online where they broke down imagery and they circled a curtain, so I don't understand what that's about.
I don't know.
That seems... there is an industry of reaction, which we're part of it, but there is a whole YouTube industry of looking at something and reacting to it. So, So thanks for doing the spoiler cast.
Of course, anytime.
Yay! So yeah, just to remind you guys that this podcast will hit my website, www.gamewithgrief.com, Monday morning at 7 a.m. So go there, leave a comment, let me know what you think of the show. Or you can go to gwgpodfellows@gmail.com and write me an email. Let me know what you think or what you want me to do to improve the show. Find me on Twitter @JustLittleJoe. Or you can go to the Apple iTunes store or the Google Play store. Apple might change the name of that, but go there, give me the likes, the subscribes, all that kind of stuff. Anything else before we leave, baby?
No, it's been great. Check it out.
Yeah, it's self-contained. Are the other ones self-contained as well? The Haunting of Hill. They're only 8 episodes, 10 episodes.
They're self-contained.
Okay, so so that might be another thing. So there you go. So everybody have a good week, and we will talk to you next week.